The atmosphere around the Toronto Blue Jays has suddenly shifted, and it all started with a piece of news that no one expected to hear this close to the start of the season. Just when fans were beginning to feel the excitement building toward opening day, an update involving one of the team's key pitchers brought a wave of concern across the fan base. With spring training moving quickly and the regular season almost here, every development matters, especially when it involves the health of a starting pitcher who is expected to play a meaningful role for this roster. Jose Berrios was originally scheduled to represent Puerto Rico in the upcoming international tournament, and that announcement had created plenty of excitement. Pitching on that stage is something many players look forward to, not only because of national pride, but also because it allows them to compete against some of the best talent from around the world. For Berrios, it seemed like another opportunity to showcase his abilities and continue building momentum heading into the new Major League Baseball season. But everything changed when routine insurance testing revealed something that immediately raised eyebrows inside the organization. During the evaluation process, an MRI scan revealed inflammation in Berrios' right elbow, the same arm he relies on every time he steps onto the mound. Anytime the word elbow enters the conversation around a pitcher, it naturally causes concern. The Blue Jays quickly clarified that there was no structural damage to the ligaments, which is certainly the best possible news in a situation like this. However, even with that reassurance, the discovery still forced the pitcher to withdraw from international competition so the team could monitor the situation more closely. What makes the situation even more interesting is the fact that Berrios dealt with elbow inflammation toward the end of last season as well. According to the team, the current inflammation is not the exact same issue he experienced before. Medical staff have indicated that it is located differently and is not connected to the previous concern that limited him late in the year. Even so, hearing that the same elbow is once again experiencing inflammation naturally makes fans uneasy. Pitchers depend heavily on the health of that joint, and history has shown how quickly elbow problems can escalate if they are not handled carefully. Manager John Schneider addressed the situation by emphasizing that Berrios actually feels good physically despite what the imaging revealed. In fact, the pitcher himself reportedly said that the way he feels and what the MRI detected do not seem to match. From his perspective, his arm does not feel like it is dealing with a serious issue. That contrast between how the player feels and what the scan shows has created a strange dynamic around the situation. On one hand, the player believes he can continue throwing. On the other hand, the team clearly wants to proceed with caution. For now, the plan is relatively simple. Berrios will continue to throw lightly and maintain his routine while the medical staff gathers more information. What he will not do, however, is take the mound in competitive games until the organization feels completely comfortable with where his arm is. That decision alone shows that the Blue Jays are trying to take a careful approach. They understand that the season ahead is long, and the last thing they want is to rush a pitcher back too quickly only to create a bigger problem later. This situation also highlights why Toronto placed such a strong emphasis on pitching depth during the offseason. The front office knew that injuries can happen at any time, especially when dealing with starting pitchers who carry a heavy workload throughout the year. Having multiple options ready to step in is part of what allows a team to stay competitive even when unexpected setbacks occur. In this case, that depth could become extremely important if Berrios needs additional time to fully recover. At the same time, it is impossible to ignore the broader implications of this situation. Berrios remains an important part of the Blue Jays rotation, and the team had been hoping he could bounce back with a strong season. There were already questions surrounding how he would perform after the challenges he faced last year. Now, with this new development, those questions have only become more noticeable. Even if the issue ends up being minor, it still adds another layer of uncertainty as the season approaches. There is also a contractual angle that makes this situation even more interesting. Berrios has an opt-out clause that could potentially come into play depending on how the season unfolds. If he were to have an outstanding year, the possibility of testing the market would certainly become part of the conversation. But if injuries or performance struggles become part of the story again, the entire outlook could change. That makes the health of his arm not only important for the team, but also for his own future. When looking at the bigger picture, this situation serves as a reminder of how fragile pitching rotations can be. One unexpected injury can quickly create a domino effect that forces other players to take on larger roles. The Blue Jays have several arms capable of stepping up, but relying too heavily on depth too early in the season is never ideal. Teams prefer to keep those options available for later in the year when fatigue and additional injuries start to accumulate. The coaching staff now faces an important balancing act. On one side, they want to trust the player when he says he feels strong and ready to continue his preparation. On the other side, they must rely on medical evaluations that suggest there is still something happening inside the elbow that needs attention. Deciding how aggressively to move forward with his throwing schedule could shape the early part of Toronto's season. Another factor adding to the conversation is the overall condition of the Blue Jays' pitching staff. Several arms within the rotation already carry their own question marks, whether due to durability concerns or limitations in workload. When one more potential issue appears, even if it seems minor on the surface, it naturally amplifies the anxiety surrounding the group. Fans begin to look at the rotation and wonder which pitchers will be counted on to deliver consistent innings if challenges start to stack up. Spring training usually serves as the period where teams fine-tune their mechanics, build stamina, and prepare their body for the grind of a full Major League Baseball schedule. But for pitchers especially, it can also become the time when small physical concerns begin to appear. The combination of ramping up velocity, increasing pitch counts, and adjusting to competitive intensity again can sometimes expose issues that were not noticeable during the offseason. That may very well be part of what is happening here with Berrios. Despite the uncertainty, the organization has made it clear that they are not panicking. Their public comments continue to emphasize that there is no structural damage and that the pitcher feels strong. Still, the fact that he will miss the opportunity to represent Puerto Rico in international competition shows that the team is prioritizing long-term health over short-term excitement. For fans who are looking forward to watching him compete on that stage, it is disappointing news, but it is also a sign that the Blue Jays are trying to make the smartest decision for the months ahead. As the countdown to opening day continues, every update regarding Berrios will be closely monitored. The team hopes the inflammation will settle down quickly, allowing him to resume his normal preparation without further complications. But until he is back on the mound in full game situations, the conversation surrounding his elbow will remain one of the most closely watched storylines within the organization. And with so many expectations surrounding the Blue Jays this season, the health of their rotation is already becoming one of the biggest factors that could shape how the entire year unfolds. As the days continue to pass during spring training, the situation surrounding Jose Berrios is becoming one of the most discussed topics among Blue Jays fans. Even though the organization has tried to calm the noise by insisting that the issue is manageable, the reality is that whenever a pitcher is dealing with elbow inflammation, people naturally begin to ask bigger questions. It is not necessarily about panic, but it definitely raises a level of caution that cannot be ignored, especially when the regular season is right around the corner. What makes this situation more complicated is the timing. With only a short window remaining before games start to count in the standings, every pitcher in the rotation is supposed to be reaching that final stage of preparation. This is the moment when starters begin stretching out their pitch counts, building rhythm, and locking into the routine they will follow during the long Major League season. Any interruption during this phase can make things feel uncertain, even if the injury itself is not considered severe. The Blue Jays coaching staff now has to decide how aggressively they want to approach Berrios' progression. On one side of the conversation is the simple fact that the pitcher says he feels good. From his perspective, the arm is responding well, and he believes he can continue throwing without major restrictions. But the medical side of the organization cannot ignore what the MRI revealed. Even if there is no structural damage, inflammation is still a signal that the body is reacting to something, and that reaction deserves attention. This is why many within the organization appear to be leaning toward patience rather than urgency. If the inflammation calms down with a bit of rest and careful monitoring, then the entire situation could end up being nothing more than a small bump in the road during spring training. But if the team were to rush the process and push Berrios into competitive outings too quickly, they could risk turning a manageable issue into something far more serious later in the year. And that is exactly the type of scenario every baseball team tries to avoid. Pitching injuries have become an increasingly common part of the sport, especially in an era where velocity continues to climb and pitchers are constantly pushing the limits of their arms. Organizations across the league have learned the hard way that ignoring early warning signs can lead to long-term consequences. That reality is likely influencing how Toronto is handling the situation. At the same time, the conversation naturally shifts toward the rest of the starting rotation. When one pitcher becomes uncertain, the spotlight immediately moves to the others who will be expected to carry a larger share of the workload. The Blue Jays have invested heavily in building a rotation that can compete with anyone in the league, but even strong rotations can start to feel fragile if multiple question marks begin appearing at once. Several pitchers on the roster already come with their own set of uncertainties. Some are returning from injuries that limited them in previous seasons, while others are still working toward fully stretching out their innings during spring training. When everything is running smoothly, those concerns are manageable because the depth of the staff provides a safety net. But if health issues begin stacking up, even the deepest rotations can find themselves under pressure. That is why durability becomes such a valuable trait in a starting pitcher. Teams rely heavily on players who can consistently take the mound every fifth day and deliver solid innings. When those dependable arms are available, they stabilize the entire pitching staff and allow managers to keep the bullpen fresh. If those innings suddenly disappear because of injuries, the ripple effect can be felt throughout the entire roster. In the case of Berrios, the Blue Jays were hoping this season would represent an opportunity for him to regain the form that once made him one of the more reliable starters in the league. His talent has never been in question, but baseball careers often move through cycles of dominance and adjustment. After dealing with ups and downs in recent seasons, a healthy and productive year would have been a major boost both for the player and for the team's long-term outlook. Now, the focus shifts toward simply making sure he can start the season in good condition. Even if that means delaying his first appearance or carefully managing his early workload, the priority will always be protecting the health of his arm over the course of the full season. 162 games create a marathon of physical stress, and preserving pitchers for the later months is often just as important as winning games in April. The situation also opens the door for other pitchers within the organization to make an impression. Spring training has always been a stage where unexpected performances can change the trajectory of a player's season. When an opportunity appears, whether because of injury or roster adjustments, someone is usually ready to step forward and show they belong at the highest level. For young pitchers or depth options, moments like these can become career-defining chances. That dynamic is part of what makes spring training so fascinating across Major League Baseball. While fans often focus on the established stars preparing for another season, there are dozens of players behind the scenes fighting for roster spots and meaningful roles. A strong stretch of performances during this period can transform a fringe player into a valuable contributor once the regular season begins. But before we move forward, don't forget to join our channel and give this video a like. Your support helps us keep delivering the latest news about the Los Angeles Dodgers. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the news, so drop a comment below. Whispers are beginning to circulate across the baseball world as anticipation builds for the next edition of the World Baseball Classic. Among the many storylines already gaining momentum, one rumor continues to gather attention inside clubhouses and among league insiders. Several marquee names from the Los Angeles Dodgers could emerge as some of the tournament's biggest attractions. While official rosters remain closely guarded, sources around the league suggest that multiple Dodger stars are expected to headline their respective national teams, instantly elevating the competitive level and global appeal of the event. The Dodgers have long been known for assembling one of the most talent-rich rosters in Major League Baseball, and that depth could soon be on full international display. The speculation has sparked excitement among fans who remember how the World Baseball Classic transforms familiar MLB rivalries into something entirely different. Teammates become opponents, clubhouse chemistry gives way to national pride, and some of the sport's brightest stars suddenly carry the weight of their countries on their shoulders. If the rumors prove accurate, the Dodgers clubhouse could become one of the most heavily represented in the tournament. Within league circles, the idea has already fueled debates about how dominant those players might look outside the regular MLB schedule. The Dodgers roster is packed with all-star caliber talent, players accustomed to postseason pressure and the spotlight of one of baseball's most scrutinized markets. Translating that experience to an international stage could make them central figures in the narrative of the tournament. Executives around the league are reportedly watching the situation closely. Participation in the World Baseball Classic often creates unforgettable moments, but it also introduces new dynamics for teams preparing for the long MLB season. Still, many believe the exposure and prestige of the tournament outweigh the concerns, particularly for a franchise whose stars are already among the most recognizable in the sport. For now, nothing has been formally confirmed. Yet the growing chatter suggests that when the first pitch of the World Baseball Classic is finally thrown, the spotlight may shine brightly on a familiar shade of Dodger blue, scattered across multiple national uniforms and ready to shape one of baseball's most captivating global stages. That's all for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to stay up to date with exclusive news about the Los Angeles Dodgers, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that like button. We always appreciate your comments and feedback. See you in the next video.